The Sixth Voyage of Sindbad the Sailor, from Sindbad the Sailor and Other Stories from the Arabian Nights, illustrated by Edmund Dulac. On a day when I was living happily in Baghdad, having forgotten the perils and dangers of my former voyages, I was sitting at ease in my garden when a party of merchants came to me, and their tales of travel aroused within my bosom a great longing to engage again in the hazardous delights of those things. I pondered long upon the matter, and though I had said within myself, "Never will I set forth again," I found that my mind was made up in spite of me. Therefore I set about collecting merchandise, and having packed a goodly number of bales, I departed for El-Basra, where I took ship with a company of merchants and others of high repute. The outward voyage was pleasant and fortunate, and we did as others do, buying and selling and amusing ourselves in different cities. But there came a day of disaster, when the master of the ship suddenly discovered that we had wandered from our course and had lost our reckoning. He plucked his beard and smote his breast and cried out in despair that we had sailed into an unknown sea where dire perils awaited us. And so it proved, for not long afterwards, while we were sailing in a calm sea, a sudden wind burst upon us, and before the sails could be loosed, the rudder was broken, and the ship drifted and was driven at last upon the sides of a high mountain rising up to heaven. She was dashed to pieces by the violence of the waves, and from that terrible wreck few survived. There were some others beside myself who clung to the sides of the mountain, and by tooth and nail climbed to a place of safety. Little by little, when the tide receded, we made our way down among the crags until we came to a strip of seashore, and from this point we could see that the island was of large size, its interior being sheltered from storms by the front of the mountain. But what took our wonder was this. On the seashore was amassed the wealth of 1,000 wrecks. Scattered here, there, and everywhere, in foam and high dry, were flotsam and jetsam of richest merchandise, much of it spoiled by the sea, but much more cast high up and still of great value. All along the shore were planks and fragments of many vessels that had been wrecked on this inhospitable coast. And this was not all, for when we proceeded through the island, we found a spring of pure ambergris overflowing into the sea, and by this the whales are attracted, but when they have swallowed it and dived to the depths of the sea, it turns in their stomachs, and they eject it, so that it rises to the surface in solid lumps, such as are found by sailors. But the ambergris that is cast about the opening of the spring melts in the heat of the sun, and its perfume is blown about the island, wafted sweet upon the breeze like fragrant musk. When we had explored the island and wondered at the many strange things it contained, we searched among the wreckage on the shore and found some few barrels of preserved meats, and on these we stayed our hunger. With the provisions on the shore and the fruit we secured on the island, we were in no danger of starvation, but a kind of fever seized upon our company, and one after another sickened and died. This was a time of stress and despair. Day after day the living buried the dead, until there was only one left, and that one was I. And I wept and waited, and as if death would not come uninvited, I arose and dug myself a grave in readiness, for there was none left to bury me when I died. It was on the seashore that I made my grave, so that when I should come to lie in it in my last moments, the wind should blow the sand upon me and bury me. And in this state of mind I blamed myself for setting out on this voyage in disregard of the lessons learned from former perils. But God in his mercy led my footsteps forth, and I roamed in the island, restless for the end. In my wanderings I came to a river gushing forth out of the side of a mountain, and after flowing for a space between banks of verdure in a valley, entering again another mountain. Having followed it to this point, I sat down upon a bank against the mountain wall and pondered. And I said within myself, this river, flowing through caverns within the mountain, must have an opening somewhere, perchance in a fertile country where people dwell. For a long time I turned the chances of this within my mind, and at last decided to build a raft and commit myself upon it to the current, for at most it were better to die that way than in my present desolation. By means of ropes and wreckage from the seashore, my raft was soon constructed, and in its construction I omitted not to measure it according to the width of the river. Then, full of a wild hope that I might at length reach an inhabited region, I stowed upon it rich goods from the shore, ambergris from the spring, and the rarest jewels I could find in the beds of the watercourses. As I set myself upon the raft and launched it, I said, if I perish, I perish. But if I come to the haunts of men, I come to them rich in precious things. No sooner had I entered into the aperture of the mountain than I was suddenly encased in darkness, and, having no choice which way I went, flung myself flat on the raft, lest my head should be shattered against the roof of the tunnel. Like this I floated on, sometimes feeling there was a wide space around me, and sometimes clinging to the raft, lest some narrowing of the passage should sweep me to destruction. And all this time my terror was so acute that at last I swooned, and lay face downward on the raft, the plaything of fate and the sport of the rushing current. When I awoke, I found myself in the open air. The sun was shining above, and the birds were singing in the trees around me. I was still lying on the raft, which was tied to a stake on the shore of a beautiful lake. As soon as I had raised myself and looked about me, a number of dark-skinned people gathered round and questioned me in an unknown tongue, but I shook my head, understanding nothing of what they said. At last, one advanced from among them, and addressing me in Arabic, said, "Peace be with thee, brother." Then I seized him joyfully by the hand and greeted him, but I was weary and hungry, and could give no account of myself because of my utter exhaustion. Seeing my state, he called for food and wine, and they hastened to set them before me. When I had eaten and drunk, and my strength had returned to me, I told what I had come through, and the one who had addressed me in Arabic interpreted it to the others. They were filled with wonder at my story, and insisted that I should accompany them to their king and acquaint him with the history of my strange adventure. So they took me, with the raft and all the riches I had laid upon it, and led me before their king. And from his state and magnificence I knew that I beheld the king of Sindbad, whose name and power and learning are known through all the earth. He saluted me in the custom of my own people, addressing me in Arabic, which fell easily from his tongue. This set me at my ease, and I told him my story, to which he listened with great attention. When I had finished, he raised his hand and said, "By Allah, thou hast endured much, and thy case is extraordinary. Thou art greatly favored by fate, wherefore I join my happiness with thine at thy deliverance and safety." I was greatly moved at his words, and begging his acceptance of a gift at my hands, I took the rarest jewels from the raft, together with a quantity of ambergris and aloe wood, and laid them at his feet. He graciously accepted my present, and immediately established me in a position of honor, bidding me dwell with him in his palace. I accepted his hospitality, and remained in his land in great happiness and honor, associating with the grandees and the people of rank. And I said to myself, I care not if the rest of my days are passed in this kingdom of splendor and magnificence. It was indeed a land of wealth and abundance, and there the day is equally divided with the night the whole year round, and when the sun rises, light bursts suddenly upon the earth, and when it sets, the darkness descends like a curtain that is loosed. There is a lofty mountain whose glittering streams contain the richest jewels with rare minerals, and everywhere on hill and valley are wafted the fragrant odors of spices. The delights of this realm held me enthralled for a long time, so that I forgot my own country, wherein is the abode of peace. But on a day when I ascended the high mountain and looked far out across the sea, I seemed to hear the voice of my own land calling to me. Then, with that far call still in my ears, I went in to the king and asked him to let me go. At first he demurred, and tried to induce me to remain with him and his people, but when I pressed for his permission, he relented, and gave me a large sum of money for my journey, and also many gifts. When I was about to depart, the king called me to him and handed me a letter written on fine parchment. This he asked me to give into the hands of the Caliph Harun al-Rashid. The substance of the letter was this: "The king of Serendib sends greeting. Peace be on thee, O brother, from the king of Serendib, who commands 1,000 elephants, and in whose palace are 10,000 jewels. By the bearer of this we send thee a gift, for we have a deep affection for thee. The gift is all too trifling, but we beseech thee to accept it graciously, and reply to us, Peace be upon thee." The present with which I was entrusted was a goblet of ruby, the inside of which was set with sparkling diamonds and priceless pearls, truly a kingly gift. Having bade farewell to the king and such of his people that I had associated with, I embarked in a large ship, which was bound for El Basra. In good time we reached that port, and I journeyed up the river to Baghdad. My first thought was to deliver the letter and the gift into the hands of the Caliph. So I lost no time in approaching him and fulfilling my pledge to the king of Serendib. He was greatly pleased with the letter, and when he saw the sparkling goblet of ruby and precious stones, he was filled with delight. "Oh, Sindbad," he said, "this king must be exceedingly wealthy and powerful. What sayest thou?" And I told him of the wonder and magnificence of the land of Serendib, how the king's seat of state is on a splendid throne placed upon a gigantic elephant, with his courtiers and officials standing about him on a richly decorated platform. How there are around his majesty 1,000 other elephants on which sit the princes of the land, and surrounding all, on every hand, 10,000 horsemen, clad in silk and gold, and how a crier goes before the king, exalting him to heaven, and another behind him proclaiming, "Great is he, but he will die. Again and again and again I say it, he will die." And as I continued to tell of these things, the Caliph marveled greatly at the wisdom and power of this king. "Report hath spoken truly," he said, "as thou hast witnessed to me, O Sindbad. The tales of his might and dominion have exaggerated nothing." He then thanked me for my faithful service, and bestowed rich gifts upon me, and bade me seek my own house in peace and content. There in the bosom of my family I lived at ease, having put behind me the perils of travel, and set fixedly before me the determination never to seek them again. Yet, O Sindbad the landsman, my determination was overruled by the direct command of the Caliph, and, if thou wilt honor me by thy presence again tomorrow, I will relate to thee the events of my 7th and last voyage.